This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. We are halfway through the season, and we already know that the AFC North is the toughest division in football. How do we know that the AFC North is the toughest division in football? Because all four AFC North teams, as of right now, qualify for the playoffs. I'm sure that's a stat that you've heard of. But let me ask you this question. Who's the worst defense in the AFC North? And then you really start to get the grasp, the depths of how deep this division is when I ask that question and when you have to answer it. Like, seriously, who's the worst division in the AFC North? Is it the Pittsburgh Steelers? Is it the Cincinnati Bengals, who have been a top 10 defense for the last 2 seasons? Is it the Baltimore Ravens, who are putting up historic numbers? Or is it the Cleveland Browns defense, who are putting up even more historic numbers? That's when you get the grasp, the understanding of just how good it is. And also, I want to point out, every team in this division is in the playoffs right now. But it's not like every team had a smooth start to the season. You can honestly say that they went through a fair amount of turbulence that would suggest that the second half of the season could be even more successful for these AFC North teams. You look at Pittsburgh, they're dealing with a young quarterback who's trying to get it together. They're getting a little bit of drama with George Pickens right now. They lost one of their best players, Cam Hayward, on the defensive line, as well as Deontay Johnson. And they are now getting those 2 players back, and eventually they'll get Minkah Fitzpatrick back to that defense. So Pittsburgh's going through it, 5-3. Cleveland, they going through it. They might not have their starting tackles on both sides now. And they might lose the dude who's starting for the dude who started at right tackle, right? In DeJuan Jones, right? The backup right tackle, technically. Even though he's been playing like a starter, he might be out for a little bit of time, or at least for a week or 2, with a couple of injuries that have stacked up. The Browns have lost their quarterback for about 5 weeks when Deshaun Watson went out with the shoulder injury. Nick Chubb out for the year in week 2. The Browns have been through it. 5-3. Cincinnati Bengals. They were the original team going through it, right? Started the season 1-3. Joe Burrow's calf. Is that going to be a big deal? Is it going to not? Like a quarterback injury issue where you were worried about that affecting his level of play, and it's only the last couple of weeks that you feel like he's gotten back to where you expect him to be. They're 5-3. And they're probably only going to get better going forward as well. And then the Baltimore Ravens are 7-2, despite having a new offense, having to work in that new offense. They had some inconsistencies and a ton of injuries on the offensive line at wide receiver early in the year. Remember those crazy injury reports we used to get for Baltimore in September? They're 7-2. My point is that this division has accomplished this, despite the fact that a lot of things have gone wrong for every team in this division, which tells me that these are all 4 good teams, playoff quality teams. Even the Pittsburgh Steelers, as much as I think Kenny Pickett's not good, they're a good team around him. Cleveland Browns, you think what you want about Deshaun Watson, but you know that's a good team around him. They've beaten good teams without Deshaun Watson. They've beaten some good teams with Deshaun Watson. They're a good team. We don't even question this about the Cincinnati Bengals. They just beat 2 good teams back to back. And then the Baltimore Ravens, we know that they're a good team. They're 7-2. This is the AFC North. This is the insanity of the AFC North. If you ever wanted to have a friend who does not understand what the AFC North is like, understand what the AFC North is like, again, ask them that one simple question and watch them have a revelation right at that moment. Ask them the question. who's the worst defense in the AFC North? And they'll be like, it's easy. And then they'll think about it. And then they'll think about it. And then they'll have a realization. Wow. Those are some really good defenses in the AFC North. They might have 4 of the top 10 defenses in the NFL. Hell, they might have 4 of the top 8 defenses in the NFL. All in the AFC North. Every week, there's a really good defensive player you're playing against. If it's not going to be a Myles Garrett or TJ Watt level player that you're going up against, like a first ballot Hall of Famer already, then you're going up against Trey Hendrickson, who is really good, in a Bengals unit that has been really, really good. One of the few defenses that's been able to put a close to the Pat Mahomes faucet. You know what I mean? Like, they've been the one team able to handle that problem in the AFC because of that defense over the last couple of years. And then you look at Baltimore, and they were one of the best defenses last year. They're one of the best defenses this year. That's what people mean by the AFC North is different. So that's my opening soliloquy about the AFC North and how incredible every AFC North team is. So what I want to do in this video is talk about each team, what I feel like each team's struggles are going to be going ahead in this season, and where teams' successes are going to be at the halfway mark of this season. I'll start with the Cincinnati Bengals because this might be the easiest / hardest team to do this for. When I look at where things are going to go right for the Bengals, I think that the offense is finally clicking and the defense is clicking. That team to me seems like a team ready to go downhill. I expect the Bengals to be very good in this second half of the season, right? The only issue with the Cincinnati Bengals is that they have an incredibly tough schedule for the rest of the year. They're going to go into a stretch here where they play they play Baltimore and Pittsburgh back to back after just playing San Francisco and Buffalo. And then at the end of the year, they get a stretch. I think they even play the Texans in that, which we can include them as a tough team as well. And then I even think they get a stretch at the end of the season where they play the Browns at the end of the year, but they play the Chiefs right before that. So it's not going to stop. They have probably the toughest schedule of any AFC North team. And that's going to be their biggest struggle for the rest of the year, is handling that schedule. But when you look at where things can go right for the Bengals, it all starts with Joe Burrow. And Joe Burrow has been playing at a very high level the last couple of weeks. I think, and it's going to sound crazy, but I mentioned this in my video with Ace, I think it really did matter that he took a bunch of hits in Tennessee and didn't have to get back on the injury report. Like, that really gave him the confidence to come back out here and be Joe Burrow again. And then you got the bye week and everything else like that. But I think after that Tennessee game, that's where Joe Burrow kind of like realized he wasn't going to get hurt. And I say this all the time when it comes to injuries. There are 2 hurdles you need to get over. There is the literal physical hurdle, right? You need to physically heal the injury. That's one thing. The bigger hurdle is the mental hurdle, right? It's the, I'm not going to re-injure this. I'm not thinking about this injury all the time, because you go from a period of time when you have an injury. If it's a knee injury, it's like a year. If it's a shoulder injury or something like that, you have like a month or 2 where all you are thinking about every day is that body part and how it's broken and how it got broken and all whatever it is, right? You're thinking about that all the time. So when you go back to playing, stuff that you didn't used to think about, you're going to think about. It's the mental hurdle, right? It's why it takes like a year for guys to get back to what they were after like an ACL or Achilles injury, because they got to stop thinking about it. And the only thing that's going to make them stop thinking about it is to get reps and just feel normal out there. But that's what it was for Joe Burrow, right? He had that calf injury. He spent all summer thinking about that calf. He spent the first few weeks of the season thinking about that calf. And then he got hit so much and that calf didn't break that he was like, I don't got to think about this no more, dog. I'm going to just play. And then he just played and he played well. And now he's back. So that's really where I think this Bengals offense is going to get going downhill. The defense seems like they have figured out how to play in the post Jesse Bates era for them. And they're rolling downhill. They're one of the best defenses in the NFL, and they're going to be one of the more explosive offenses. Not necessarily one of the most consistent offenses, but explosive. And that combo has been a recipe to get to the AFC Championship game for the last couple years. And this looks like the same team that was able to accomplish that. So the Cincinnati Bengals, I think they're on their way. They're rolling downhill. Let's talk about the Baltimore Ravens. What's the Baltimore Ravens' biggest challenge going forward in this season? I think they have two. They have two position groups on this team that aren't great. Like, you can make the argument that they're decent, but they're not great. They're not plus. They are at best average, if not mediocre. And that's edge, and that's wide receiver. Those are the two big flaws on this Ravens team. Their wide receivers just aren't great. Their edges just aren't great, right? Odell Beckham, he looks like an older version of Odell Beckham, right? Useful at times, but only in flashes. He's not going to be consistent Odell Beckham. I don't know why people hold on to that dream. Rashad Bateman, I mean, if you want to live on that dream right now, you can, but I don't think it's happening for him at least this year, maybe next year, or at least like maybe the second half of the year. But what we've seen in the first half has not been promising from Rashad Bateman. Nelson Aguilar is Nelson Aguilar. And Zay Flowers is Zay Flowers, and he's decent. He's really good at times, but also, it's not the easiest person to get the ball to because of his size. And we've seen that pop up in NFL games this year. So you look at that, Mark Andrews as well, who we know he's solid, one of the better tight ends in football. The question is, when the Ravens play elite teams, is that going to start to matter more? Because that hasn't really been put to the test with the Baltimore Ravens, is when they play those elite teams, is that going to matter more? Because I think that it will matter that they don't have a great edge rush. I think that it will matter that they don't necessarily have the type of wide receivers that they want, right? You go back to that Cincinnati game that they played in Cincinnati, and they beat them. But we've already went through this. We know that Joe Burrow from weeks 1 to 4 was a different Joe Burrow than what he's going to be for the rest of the season. And you were only able to get a 3-point victory out of that, which, hey, look, I don't care who you play in the division, 3-point victory is a victory. But still, you wonder, hey, if the Bengals were at full strength, could that have gone differently for the Baltimore Ravens? And then you look at their other loss is to Pittsburgh, who has an elite defense, but like not an elite offense. And we saw that loss had more to do with drops than anything. But you look at this schedule so far, and you don't really see any truly elite teams. You see teams that people thought were good, but not elite. Like, people think Seattle's good. Nobody thinks they're going to be in the NFC Championship conversation. People think that Detroit's good, but they're a fun story. They're not like a true NFC Super Bowl contender. They're not an elite team. They haven't really played an elite team this year, and I don't think they will until the second half. And let's see, they got Bengals week 11, Thursday Night Football. That'll be a big test for the Baltimore Ravens. And I think maybe Jacksonville. We'll see where San Francisco is at. The Dolphins are going to be an interesting one, even though the Dolphins seem to fold against good teams as well. But I think they're going to be some tougher tests for the Baltimore Ravens coming up in the later part of this season than in the early part of this season. So that's where, I would have my concerns for the Baltimore Ravens going forward. Where I would be excited on the Baltimore Ravens is the evolution of Lamar Jackson. Look, Lamar Jackson looks like an excellent pass thrower of the football, and he is living up to everything that everybody thought he could be, at least people who believed in him as a passer. And if he keeps taking those steps, as well as being the athletic guy that he is, there's no roof to that ceiling when it comes to Lamar Jackson and when it comes to where this Ravens team can go with Lamar Jackson. Let's talk about Pittsburgh. The roadblocks coming ahead for Pittsburgh, I think, are offensively. they have some things coming up. It is clear that George Pickens is not happy. And how they choose to handle that situation is going to be interesting. But also Deontay Johnson has come back. But we'll talk about that in another thing. But it seems like there's some roadblocks with just making sure everybody's happy. Like the whole Kenny Pickett thing. Here's the thing about young quarterbacks. If the first half of that year isn't good, that second half can either be an improvement or it can be a drastic regression, because now Kenny Pickett's playing against teams who've already seen him 2-3 times before, and they're even more prepared for him, right? Like it's like how Baker Mayfield got worse the more he played. It kind of feels like that, especially within. Well, he was always all right in the division for the most part, so that might be a bad example, but it's kind of like that. And you can look at Kenny Pickett's career. You can look at Baker Mayfield's career. They're not the same player. Baker Mayfield is clearly a better player at this point. But yeah, that's the thing with Kenny, is just figuring out where he's going to be at. Is he going to be Teddy Bridgewater? Is he going to be anything above that? Or is he going to be below that? And that's where you worry about Kenny Bridgewater for sure. So, yeah, that's what I would look at with Pittsburgh. Also, that defense, like if you look at some of these numbers, they're good defense, no doubt, but they're living off a lot of takeaways. And what happens if that faucet turns off for them? Now, Pittsburgh, they've been getting them takeaways for forever, so maybe it never turns off, but that's also something to be concerned about. Where it could go right is that they're getting healthier, right? Minka's going to be back in a few weeks. They just got Cam Hayward back. They just got Deontay Johnson back. So having those players back is going to make a big difference for them. And maybe they even play better, or maybe Kenny Pickett gets more comfortable because of it, and the defense gets better and works over some of the flaws that you might have seen exposed with advanced stats with those two guys back, Cam Hayward and Minkah Fitzpatrick. So that could also be something that goes super right for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And they've already been through a decent amount, so we'll see what goes on. And Pittsburgh never dies for whatever reason, so can't bet against them. Cleveland Browns are an interesting team here, because it's hard for me to imagine that the next 8 weeks for that team goes any worse than the first when it comes to stuff that's happened, right? They lost Nick Chubb. They lost Deshaun Watson. That's the whole firepower for the offense right there. Luckily, the defense has been playing at an elite level that's been able to carry the offense throughout these weeks, and Amari Cooper's been playing at an elite level. So when I look at where the roadblocks can be for the Cleveland Browns, I think you have to look at Deshaun Watson in this offense when it comes to turnovers. Can they slow the turnovers down, or are they going to be a historically turn the ball over team? That's going to be the big question for them. And when it comes to Deshaun Watson, how long is the process going to take? I talk about Deshaun Watson getting back as a process. It's not going to be a one-day thing. It's not going to be a 2-day thing. It's not going to be a 1-week thing, 2-week thing, 3-week thing. Like, it's going to be a process to get him back to where you want him to get to. And one thing we haven't had a lot of with Deshaun Watson is games, right? He's played 10 games so far since he's been traded to Cleveland, partly because of suspension, the other part because of injury. So you want to see him play more games so you can get a better read on what the process is going to be like for him. There's a world where he comes out, plays great on Sunday, and he's back to being Deshaun. There's a world where that might take a few weeks, and there's a world where that might never happen, right? That's where a lot of the hopes offensively lean on for Deshaun, and it leans on him being able to stay healthy, and it leans on him being able to continue the process and make improvements week on and week. And I think he's done that, right? If you look at the Tennessee game, he did really good throwing that deep ball to the numbers, but he really didn't attack the middle of the field. Last week, he attacked the middle of the field fine, I thought. Especially when I talked to Jake Burns, he felt like that as well. So, maybe that's something that's coming back to his game, and he can build on top of that this week, or he could throw a bunch of interceptions this week. We really won't know. But yeah, I think that's where the roadblocks are. Where's Deshaun Watson? Where are they going to be at? But ironically enough, as much as Deshaun Watson could be a roadblock to this team's success, he is the roadmap to this team's success. Because if he does hit that upper echelon level of play and you have this level of defense, look at any team that's had a good offense and a great defense, they're usually in the Super Bowl. And when you got the best defense in the NFL, in a lot of people's opinion. And if you have just good offense, Super Bowl and Super Bowl winners are made of that combination. So look, as much as Deshaun can be a roadblock to your success, if he starts to play relatively well, like to Pro Bowl level well, not even like all pro level well, if he plays Pro Bowl level well, boy, oh boy, you got a shot if you're the Cleveland Browns. You really do. But I think a lot of this is going to have to be due on Deshaun Watson stepping up and Elijah Moore stepping up alongside with him. And if you get some of that, you get a good second option at receiver to go along with Coop and David Njoku, then you start cooking with gas if you're the Cleveland Browns. All of these teams, I think with 3 of these teams, I wouldn't be surprised if they ended up in the AFC Championship or the Super Bowl if things went right? To me, those 3 teams are Baltimore, Cincinnati, and Cleveland. If things go right for those teams down the stretch, those are Super Bowl contending teams. They have the roster, they have the players, they are Super Bowl contending level teams if things go right. Now, obviously, 3 teams can't make the Super Bowl. They're all going to have to play each other, and that's what the AFC North is going to all be about. But I'm here to say that this division is real because this division has got to this point despite the fact that for every team, things have gone wrong for them early. A lot of things have gone wrong for them early. Not a single team has gotten a good break in the first half of this season, and they're still at this point. That tells you the quality of team that is in this division and the quality of coaching and the quality of player in this division. It's unrivaled. It's unlike anything else right now. And honestly, instead of dreading it, I feel like we should appreciate this because a division being this strong, while the AFC North is always tough, a division being this strong only comes around once in a very few years, right? Like once in a very rare time. It's like a solar eclipse or something like that. It don't happen every year. And if you're a Browns fan or you're just a fan of football in general, the AFC North is the place to be and to focus on because this division is a football junkie's paradise. But that's my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. You have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.